Our nation has seen times like this before, especially during the Red Scare and Palmer raids. Like the McCarthy-era witch hunts of the 1950s, your campaign of fear and repression is eating away at foundational values of our democracy. Back then, it took one voice, Attorney Joseph Welch, to cut through the hysteria with the simple question that marked the beginning of the end of that shameful era. He asked Senator McCarthy, have you no sense of decency? And I would ask you the same, Secretary Rubio. But you have shown through your words and your actions what the answer is. And I have to tell you directly and personally that I regret voting for you for Secretary of State. I yield back.
May I respond?
You may sit.
Well, first of all, your regret for voting for me confirms I'm doing a good job, based on what I know.
Well, that's
about
just
your
a
record and
flippant
what you
statement,
stand
Mr.
for.
Secretary.
Can I respond, Mr. Chairman?
You may.
I didn't ask.
Senator, please let the Secretary have
I'd be
the floor.
happy to, but then I can respond to his.
Your time's up, Senator, and willfully used, I might add.
Well-
Your remarks do not represent the view of this committee.
Well, Mr. Chairman-
Secretary, please.
Well, I'd like to. I can't respond to everything he said because much of these are untrue, but I'll go through a few. First of all, I'm actually very proud of the work we've done with USAID. For example, I don't regret cutting $10 million for male circumcisions in Mozambique. I don't know how that makes us stronger and more prosperous as a nation.
I raised
don't regret
Sudan, Mr.
psychosocial
Secretary.
support services.
I raised
USAID.
Sudan, Mr. Secretary,
Can I
not
respond, Mr.
Mozambique.
Chairman, or do I?
Senator, I'd ask you to suspend. You had 7 straight minutes of
I chose to
railing that.
use my time that way, Mr. Chairman. That's my right to
Please
use my
suspend
time that way.
Secretary Rubio.
Well, I can go on. I mean, there's other things here. We spent $227,000 for Big Cat's YouTube channel from USAID. We spent $14 million for social cohesion in Mali, whatever the hell that means. So I can go on and on. I got the list here, and there's more. I didn't even bring the whole list. In the case of El Salvador, absolutely. Absolutely. We deported gang members, including the one you had a margarita with. And that guy is a human trafficker, and that guy is a gangbanger, and the evidence is going to be clear in the days to come.
Mr.
You're
Chairman,
going to see who you went to defend.
Senator,
I'm sorry,
please,
Mr. Chairman.
Secretary
No.
Rubio has the floor.
Mr. Chairman, he can't make unsubstantiated
Senator,
comments like that.
Secretary Rubio has the floor. You had
Secretary
your time.
Rubio should take that testimony to the federal court in the
Senator-
United States because
Well,
he hasn't done it under oath.
Here's another point, okay? There is a division in our government between the federal branch and the judicial branch. No judge in the judicial branch cannot tell me or the president how to conduct foreign policy. No judge can tell me how I have to outreach to a foreign partner or what I need to say to them. And if I do reach to that foreign partner and talk to them, I am under no obligation to share that with the judiciary branch. Just like a judge cannot order me to negotiate with a foreign minister of Russia, they cannot order me to negotiate with a foreign minister or the president of El Salvador. And if I did negotiate with them, which we have responded to them, and we've told them, we've had communications with the president of El Salvador. I am under no obligation, under our division of powers in this country, and to share with the judicial branch how I conduct the diplomacy of the United States. It would actually be counterproductive. If I started sharing with courts, or frankly, with the media, my conversations with foreign leaders and all of their details, no foreign leader would talk to me again, and we would break trust with them. So I have complied with every court order. What I won't comply with is an order to disclose what I'm saying and what we're talking about with a foreign leader, because then they won't talk to me. Diplomacy doesn't work that way. About the student visas, let me say this. I don't deport anybody, and I don't snatch anybody. The State Department does not have officers in the street snatching everybody. What I do is revoke visas, and it's very simple. A visa is not a right. It is a privilege. People apply for student visas to come into the United States and study. And if you tell me that you're coming to the United States to lead campus crusades, to take over libraries and try to burn down buildings and acts of violence, we're not going to give you a visa.
Is that what Ms. Ostork did?
We're not going to give you a visa.
Is that what she
And if you
did?
do
Come
that-
on, Mr. Secretary.
And every single
You're
one of
just
these
blowing
cases, the
smoke
factors
here
are
now.
different.
Senator-
The bottom line is, if you're
Senator,
coming here to stir up trouble on our campuses, we will deny you a visa. And if you
Does
have
the
a
First
visa
Amendment
and we find
apply
you,
to
we will
people
revoke
living
it.
in the United
And
States?
we're going to do more. There are more coming. We're going to continue to revoke the visas of people who are here as guests and are disrupting our higher education facilities. People are paying money. These kids pay money to go to school, and they have to walk through
Writing
a bunch
an
of
op-ed
lunatics
to the
who are
Tufts
here on student
newspapers
visas.
disrupting the
Simple
foreign
as
policy
that.
of the United
I want to
States.
do more. I hope we can
That's
find more of these people.
pathetic, Mr.
In fact, the other
Secretary.
day, some guys led a riot. I forgot what university it was, and I asked, please, can you find the arrest records of all the people that were arrested at that riot at that campus? Because if any of them have a visa, we're going to revoke it.
I feel so much safer
All right,
when you lock
let's,
up people like Ms. Ostork. Plaster, Ms. Secretary.
We've had enough time on the subject. Thank you very much.
Mr. Secretary, I know you would like to give a 5-minute speech back to me, but I only have a few seconds left, and I do need some information from you. As I said, we have asked and have not gotten. Can you tell me, will you share the text and details with my staff of your agreement with El Salvador and any other similar arrangements, including the funding details that we need to have?
Well, first of all, I'd like to respond to your 7-minute speech, which is primarily, I disagree like 99% of it. It's just not true. We've done nothing that's illegal. We've been in over 600 briefings to Congress. We've asked questions. We've answered questions repeatedly. We get hundreds of questions a day. We respond them as quickly as possible. And your characterization of the moves that we made
Mr. Secretary, I would just tell you, we are here because we need the information so that we can write our budget and on a bipartisan.
Well, you'll have the information you need to write a budget.
Okay, so will we get the details on the El Salvador arrangement? Yes or no?
Well, which Salvador arrangement? Are you
Your agreement that you've made with them about.
what agreement? The president of El Salvador agreed to take in 250 gangbangers, and we
there's
sent
funding
them.
details we have not gotten. We need to see what the costs are.
Well, we haven't funded that. We've provided them law enforcement assistance.
But
I know
that-
you just claimed that we cut all this law enforcement assistance. We provided El Salvador and other countries law enforcement assistance. They have the right to spend that money any way they wish. But they did us a big favor. They took 250 dangerous trained out. We didn't deport any U.S. residents. No U.S. residents were
I'm not
reported.
going to argue with you on that.
Well,
We
there's
have
not an
to-
argument, but don't say we deported U.S. residents, because we didn't.
No,
I don't
no, no,
deport
I'm-
anybody.
I'm not asking.
But we didn't deport U.S. residents.
I'm asking you whether we can see the details of the arrangements, including the funding details.
I'm giving you
as
the
an appropriate-
details. The arrangements are, we provide law enforcement funding to El Salvador, among other countries. How they choose to spend that money internally is up to
I take that as
them.
a no. How
But I can
about-
tell you,
Can you give me the details on the 200-plus offices you're proposing to
Sure, we've
eliminate?
provided that.
We need that. Can I get your commitment to
sure, of
give us
course.
those? How about
It's part of our reorg.
How about the details and justifications of your proposed rescissions from programs you claim are out of alignment with administration priorities? Are we going to get the details of that, funding priorities?
On rescissions and impoundment and things of this nature, that's obviously an OMB function, and I would talk to them about that in regard to what's going to go on with that money. I can tell you the contracts we canceled, and I can list to you the contracts we canceled and the rationale why, because I went through them
Can you get
myself.
those to us like today? So
The contracts?
Yes, and the funding arrangements that you've made. That's what I'm asking for.
Funding arrangements with who?
For any of the rescissions, for any of the funding, for any of the multiple congressional directives that you have given out so that we as an appropriations committee can make our funding decisions.
Sure, you're going to have all that information
you.
when you
I
put together a
appreciate
budget.
Thank you. I enjoyed that.
Mr. Secretary, I want to ask you about the program. It's the United States Refugee Assistance Program, and this is a program that state is the manager of, but together with other cabinet secretariats, DHS and HHS. State plays the lead management role, and it is how to manage the U.S. refugee assistance programs in tandem with contractors who help the United States on that. By an executive order on the first day of his presidency, President Trump paused all refugee programs and has canceled contracts to the agencies like the U.S. Catholic Church or Lutheran Refugee Services or HIAS or Church World Services who've been resettling refugees. Those programs are paused. There's litigation about it, but as far as I know, the United States is not, or the administration has not withdrawn the executive order. So there's essentially from this administration no refugee programs for anyone except. In early February, the president announced a special refugee program for Afrikaner farmers, justified A, by some concerns about South African foreign policy, but B, a claim that these were persecuted individuals. So right now, the U.S. refugee program allows a special program for Afrikaner farmers, the first group of whom arrived at Dulles Airport in Virginia not long ago, while shutting off the refugee program for everyone else. Do you think Afrikaner farmers are the most persecuted group in the world?
I think those 49 people that came certainly felt they were persecuted, and they've passed every sort of check mark that had to be checked off in terms of meeting the requirements for that. They live in a country where farms are taken and land is taken on a racial basis.
Okay. Do you think they're more persecuted than Uyghurs or Rohingyas, or more persecuted than political dissidents in Cuba or Venezuela or Nicaragua, or more persecuted than those who would be threatened should they be returned to Afghanistan by violence by the Taliban?
Well, the problem we face there is the volume problem, okay? If you look at all the persecuted people of the world, it's millions of people. they can't all come here. And we had refugee programs.
So
that were
why,
acting
so
as
why,
a magnet for
why
people to come here.
prioritize Afrikaner farmers?
Well, because it's a small subset, it's a new issue, and the president identified it as a problem and wanted to use it as an example. But that's different from having these refugee programs that were basically spending money to put people up in communities and accommodate them, and it was acting as a magnet. Millions of people enter this country illegally, and today the border is sealed.
Let me challenge you, and I'm just going to say for the public, if you want to understand about the, quote, persecution of Afrikaner farmers, go look at the composition of the South African government. Since July of 2024, there's a government of national unity, and the opposition party to the ANC, the Afrikaner Party, the Democracy Alliance, is part of the governing coalition. They joined the governing coalition a year ago, and the leader of that party was given the remit of Agriculture Minister, John Steenhuisen. He is the leader of the former Afrikaner Party, still widely representing Afrikaners. He is the Minister of Agriculture in South Africa right now. I assert that this claim that there's persecution of Afrikaner farmers is completely specious. Are you aware ever during the apartheid era in South Africa, did the United States establish a special program to allow South African blacks who were treated as second-class citizens in the apartheid program, a special program that they could claim refugee status in the United States?
No, because I was probably in 9th grade or 8th grade at the time.
Yeah, well, then I don't expect you to know. I'll just tell you, never has there been a program, a special program for Africans to come in as refugees to the United States. We've allowed special programs for people being persecuted for their religion, Soviet-era Jews. We've allowed special programs for people fleeing from communism, Cuba, Vietnam, the Soviet Union. We've never allowed a special program to allow Africans into the United States in an expedited refugee status until now. Afrikaner farmers living in a nation governed by a government of national unity that includes the main Afrikaner Party. And actually, an even more right-wing Afrikaner Party is also included in the coalition government. Now, would you agree with me, Mr. Secretary, that if we're interpreting the statutory phrase, a well-justified fear of persecution, we should try to do that in an even-handed way?
I think we should try to do that in the interest of the national security of the United States.
So okay, I agree with you too. We should. Should we try to do it in an even-handed way? So for example, should we say, if you're persecuted on the grounds of your religion, we'll let you in if you're a Christian, but not if you're a Muslim?
I think that the United States has a right to allow into this country and prioritize allowance of who they want to allow to come in.
But
I'm going
to ask you, what, so a well-justified fear of persecution?
Yeah, they thought that their farms were being burned down and they would be killed. I think that's a pretty good justification for wanting to come. They're afraid for their lives.
And should it be applied in an even-handed way? That's an easy.
No, our foreign policy doesn't require even-handedness. It requires prioritizing the interests of the United States.
The statutory phrase says you are entitled to entrance as a refugee if you demonstrate a well-justified fear of persecution.
No, you're not entitled.
So
you're
can
allowed.
you have a different standard based upon the color of somebody's skin? Would that be acceptable?
Well, I'm not the one arguing that. Apparently you are, because you don't like the fact that they're white, and that's why they're coming.
I'm just asking you to say that would be unacceptable.
Well, no,
that
I would say that the United States,
a very easy thing to say.
The United States has a right to pick and choose who they allow into the United States.
Even based on the color of somebody's skin.
You're the one that's talking about the color of their skin, not me. These
are
people whose farms were being burned down and they were killed because of the color of their skin. Well, you've demonstrated enough because you think anyone should be allowed into this country for any reason because they met a certain criteria.
Who has said that?
We are going to prioritize people that come into our country on the basis of what's in the interest of this country. That's a small number of people that are coming.
But you said this weekend that there would be more.
But in other cases, it's harder to vet. In other cases, it's more difficult. And by the way, the United States admits people every year. 1 million people come to this country every year legally. 1 million
and
people
now
a year come to this
there
country
is one
legally.
group of people that have an easy pass into this country. For the first time, this administration has said Afrikaners get an easy pass and refugee programs for the remainder of the world are shut off. And you can't say to the American public that we should apply this statute in an even-handed way.
No, I think it should be applied in a way. No, you shouldn't be shocked. It should be applied in the national interest of the United States. Our immigration policy should be based on the national interest of the United States. Period. End of story. If there is a subset of people that are easier to vet, who we have a better understanding of who they are and what they're going to do when they come here, they're going to receive preference, no doubt about it. There are a lot of sad stories around the world. Millions and millions of people around the world. It's heartbreaking. We cannot assume millions and millions of people around the world. No country can. So you have to have a process of deciding who do you prioritize, who do you allow in. We do it all the time. We do it in our immigration system now under our current laws. Unfortunately, it's primarily based on family connection and not on what they're going to contribute to the society from a merit standpoint. That should be changed, but that'll require statutory changes. But the bottom line is, this notion that somehow we have to accept anyone who wants to come to the United States is absurd. No country in the world has an immigration policy like that.
And no one is arguing that we should. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome back. When you were last testifying before this committee, you and I talked about water in South Texas, and we talked about the 1944 Water Treaty. As you know well, South Texas has, for the last 4 years, faced a severe drought, and that drought has been substantially exacerbated by the conduct of the government of Mexico, and in particular, its repeated and flagrant violations of the 1944 Water Treaty. Under that treaty, Mexico is obligated to provide 350,000 acre-feet of water each year to South Texas. Mexico was breaking that treaty, and there were 1.3 million acre-feet of water in arrears. As a consequence, South Texas is facing a massive drought. South Texas farmers are putting out of production up to half their acreage. They're laying off workers. Last year, the only sugar mill in the state of Texas closed because sugar farmers could not get the water to grow their crop. And you committed at that hearing to work with me and assist in pressuring Mexico to comply with that treaty. In the months since then, you have followed through on that commitment. You have leaned in vigorously with the government of Mexico. Your deputy, Chris Landau, has done the same thing. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins has done the same thing. And then critically, President Trump put out a public statement on Truth Social, making clear to Mexico that there would be serious consequences, sanctions and tariffs if they did not comply with the water treaty. I will say, as a result of the president's leadership and your hard work, we've had a major victory for South Texas, and Mexico has committed to providing 400,000 acre-feet of water, which is desperately needed. So I want to just start by saying thank you. In 4 years under Joe Biden, the Biden administration would not lift a finger for Texans, for farmers in South Texas, to hold Mexico to account. And the Trump administration has done more in 4 months fighting for water in South Texas than Joe Biden did for 4 years. So I wanted to say thank you, and I wanted to ask how the State Department is approaching next steps on the 1944 Water Treaty.
Well, first of all, we have to understand that the commitment is met, and then we have to begin to prepare for the next cycle. This is a one-year problem. So we want to continue to work on that to make sure that those commitments are made, and that then in the next cycle, this becomes made permanent. That in essence, this becomes a new standard operating procedure and not a one-off. And by the way, it has to be something that exists beyond the presidency of the current president, because if the next president doesn't prioritize it, it could go back. So I just think this continued engagement with them on our expectations. The truth of the matter is, and in fairness, the Mexican government has grown increasingly cooperative on a number of fronts, both on national security issues and common security issues, but also on issues such as this. We're also happy, I think there's also the new treatment plant that they've opened, the Tijuana wastewater one, that we think will also be very helpful to water issues in the region and also the water quality issues. But this was a good news story. I think it's what happens when you make something a priority and then follow through on it. But we have to sustain it, and that really is our focus now, to sustain this through for future cycles, not just the short term.
So, and I'll tell you, earlier this year, I went down to the Rio Grande Valley with Secretary Rollins. And in December, I wrote a provision in the continuing resolution that provided emergency relief to South Texas farmers, $280 million. And Secretary Rollins came down. Now, Brooke is the first Texan ever to be the U.S. Agriculture Secretary, and she's the first Ag Secretary in history to go to the Rio Grande Valley. And Secretary Rollins and I did a roundtable, and I will say, you and I have both been very focused on the Hispanic community in particular. I will say the impact in the Rio Grande Valley of having a president and an administration that is fighting for them is enormously consequential. And so I was very grateful that she came down, and the farmers and ranchers in South Texas see that they've got a president and an administration that's fighting for them. Let me shift to a different topic. Today, South African President Ramaphosa is in Washington, D.C. He'll be meeting with President Trump tomorrow. You and the president, as well as other administration officials, have repeatedly and rightly criticized South African policies on issues ranging from human rights to activities that directly undermine American national security. Those activities, in turn, include what appears to be an explicit and extensive pivot away from the United States and towards the Chinese Communist Party. There are also serious and credible allegations that the South African government's decision-making is compromised by widespread corruption tied directly to Iran. They are working together to target our Israeli allies on the international stage. President Ramaphosa himself has taken an aggressive position, leading a charge of genocide against Israel in the International Court of Justice. And he has pushed for precedents and policies that will not just undermine Israel, but expose American officials to vulnerabilities as well. I have every confidence that President Trump will demand South African officials change their policies and will hold them accountable if they don't. And it's critically important for the American people to understand the bases for our policies. Please talk a little bit about the extent of South Africa's malign activities and how they are undermining American national security interests.
Well, it's one of the, first of all, we chose not to participate in this year's G20 hosted by South Africa, either at the foreign minister level or the president's level. And it had a lot to do with some of these issues, in addition to some of the issues they brought on their agenda, which we don't think reflect the priorities of this administration. So the president of South Africa is here today because he says he endeavors to reset relations between our countries. And President Trump, if someone says that, is always going to be open to resetting relations, but it will have to touch on some of the issues just pointed to now. Obviously, the position they've adopted towards Israel is way, not just off balance, but completely geared towards one side, and it makes one wonder about these allegations that are out there now of foreign influence, including with Iran. They clearly, on the global stage, and multiple multinational organizations, have consistently been a vote against America's interests, time and again. Not one-off. You always understand when some country has to go in one direction opposite to you, because, you know, that happens. That's what diplomacy is ultimately about. Diplomacy is also about when we're aligned, we work together. When we're unaligned, we have to talk. But when one country is consistently unaligned with the United States on issue after issue after issue after issue, now you have to make conclusions about it. So all I could say about the meeting today, I'm not there, obviously, because I'm here with all of you. In fact, it may be going on right now as we speak, or was scheduled to go on as we speak, is this was an outreach on the part of the South African president. He said he wanted to come to Washington. He wanted to reset relations with the United States. I have no reports as to how that meeting has gone so far. If there's a willingness on their side to reset relations, obviously was something we'll explore, but we do so with eyes wide open to what they've done so far.
And how does their campaign against Israel undermine America?
Well, I think, first of all, because it echoes some of the charges that are being made by some of the biggest enemies of Israel that happen to be ours, whether it's Iran, whether it's these radical groups that chant death to America, death to Israel. So we're very concerned about that. I also think there's real concern in our mind about some of these international institutions that, frankly, South Africa has lined up strongly behind, who would seek to, if they could, jail, imprison, indict American office holders because of some of the positions we've taken on public policy, even though we're not members to the conventions that create these entities. So if you talk about these groups they are in essence utilizing their forum on the national stage as a nation state under this president and this leadership to echo the claims and the positions taken by not just Iran, but in many cases China as well.
Thank you.